Welcome to the debate. Our discussion today centers on a particularly intense experience. It was recounted by attendees of a private screening of Daniel L. Bates's film, Cognizance Altered, held at the International Fusion Film Festival out in California, and also the curated gathering that followed it. This was, well, clearly not your typical film event, and it seems to have left a pretty profound impact on everyone involved. So the central question we're going to explore today is this. Was the Cognizance Altered screening and the subsequent lullaby transmission, was it primarily an artistic endeavor, meticulously designed for profound emotional and intellectual engagement as its creators intended? Or was the entire experience actually a deliberately engineered psychological intervention, maybe even bordering on manipulation, given its significant impact on the audience? I'll be arguing that the artistic intentionality and the transformative power of this curated experience are really paramount here.
Right, and I'll be challenging those ethical implications. I'll argue for a design that I think leaned much more towards psychological engineering than purely artistic expression, especially when you look at the documented effects on those who attended and, frankly, the questions it raises about audience agency.
Okay, so this entire event, right, from the film screening itself to that intimate post-event gathering, it was, in my view, a masterfully crafted artistic experience, a kind of curated passage, if you will, designed not just to entertain, but to deeply engage and even transform its audience. The accounts we have describe it in really powerful terms: raw, unexpected, a processing, even a transmission that apparently changed things. The deliberate lack of, traditional marketing, zero marketing noise, no posters, no intro spiel, and the controlled environment, the black screen, phones, silent NDAs, that curated cold room, along with the very specific audience. Sophia Luna apparently scanned in right after the initial attendees. All of this points to intentional choices. These choices, I believe, were made to strip away distractions, to let the art truly, as they put it, choose its audience, creating a sort of unmediated encounter. The film itself, exploring these complex themes, identity loss, neurocloning, memory collapse, and then the song afterwards, Lullaby by DLB, which reportedly gave language to the feeling and offered visibility. Well, it seems aimed at creating a kind of shared undoing. This process, as it was described, seemed to bypass typical intellectual filters, leading to what they called a different kind of weight, a fundamental shift in perception for those who saw it. And Sophia Luna, as creative director at NeonVision, she acts as a key connector, actively, steering and protecting, curating the energy to facilitate this kind of profound artistic exchange. Ultimately, as was observed, DLB's work does the damage and the healing, which to me suggests a cathartic rather than manipulative artistic purpose.
While I absolutely acknowledge the artistic merit of Cognizance Altered, it sounds like a compelling psychological sci-fi thriller. The overarching experience, as it's been recounted, seems to have crossed a line from profound art into something more like a deliberately engineered psychological intervention. Attendees noted, and this is striking, the experience felt like something was happening to us actively. They described it vividly as a virus or like something messing with your internal wiring. And phrases like interactive trauma imprint from that DSTV report, which, just to clarify, really refers to a deep, potentially subconscious alteration to someone's psychological landscape, far beyond just a passing emotional response. And the claim that the film was, quote, engineered to bypass your defenses and hit something deep, intentionally impacting your emotional state. Well, these raise serious ethical questions about artistic boundaries.
The documented audience reactions are also telling. A collective tightening, a full panic response from at least one guest, reports of atypical behavioral dissociation, which, means a temporary detachment from immediate reality or sense of self, and mood flattening, a noticeable reduction in emotional range. These aren't film critiques. These sound like clinical observations. They point to specific, measurable psychological impacts. And then you have the film's subversive trauma tag and those internal warnings about high emotional exposure and volatility. that further confirms its intended impact wasn't just casual viewing. The feeling some had that the film knew their timeline, and that anonymous blog post mentioning seeing a version of ourselves we weren't ready for, it suggests a targeted impact, almost akin to what the screenplay itself calls imprint mapping, or writing over your soul in patches. And perhaps most critically, the profound lack of explicit, informed consent, given the silent NDAs and the feeling that the film just didn't ask permission. That's deeply concerning, regardless of how powerful the artistic intent might have been.
Okay, I see why you emphasize the clinical language and the sheer intensity of the experience. But let me offer maybe a different angle on this nature of artistic intent versus psychological engineering. Daniel L. Bates, through adanielsvision, created Cognizance Altered specifically to explore these deep philosophical questions about identity. The long line itself says it's about a neurophilosopher, a scholar bridging neuroscience and philosophy, looking at consciousness, whose own consciousness has been metaphysically cloned, meaning his unique mental essence, duplicated beyond just the physical. And he has to uncover who replicated his mind and why. Scenes like the one described with Isaiah Roon, where his reflections lagged, moved wrong, spoke in that hallway of mirrors. Or that really impactful line, "I can't tell if you're the me I forgot or the me I never survived." These are central to this intense artistic exploration of the self. It challenges the very notion of personal identity. The film aims to make you question your own perception, summed up by that line, "The self is just an operating system. Who has admin access now?" Now, to me, this isn't manipulation. This is a profound artistic challenge to perception, meant to, wake up the audience, mirroring Isaiah's own quest to wake up from his altered state. Yes, the film fractured things, but the song Lullaby then spoke from the font context continuation, providing emotional depth and context. That feels entirely consistent with a complex artistic narrative designed to provoke introspection, maybe even growth. Are we then saying that any art that provokes such intense emotional or even physiological responses automatically crosses into manipulation? Or isn't there a spectrum that profound art often has to navigate to achieve its transformative goals?
That's a fair point, and I agree that profound art often pushes boundaries, but I think I'd frame the distinction differently here. While the thematic content of Cognizance Altered is undeniably potent, the actual execution of the viewing experience, the whole package, appears to have been engineered for specific psychological effects, not purely for exploring themes. Attendees reported the atmosphere was heavy, dense, too quiet, almost feeling like a warning, and Sophia Luna's precise timing, scanning in just so, and her later quite revealing statement, "That wasn't a film, that was a transmission, and I brought you here to feel it." Well, that strongly suggests premeditation, a deliberate design that goes beyond typical artistic curation or just the spontaneous impact of a powerful film. Then there are the clinical terms from the DSTV report. Atypical behavioral dissociation, again, that's a clinical term for feeling disconnected, and mood flattening, a significant reduction in emotional response. These aren't metaphors. They describe measurable psychological impacts. Add to that the non-commercial use flags and the warnings about high emotional exposure and volatility apparently embedded in the film's metadata, it further proves this was designed to hit something deep, to intentionally impact the emotional state, not just provide a profound cinematic experience. The deliberate control over the environment, the audience's state, it feels less like an artistic showing and more like, an experimental setup. And doesn't the sheer involuntary nature of those reactions described, that collective tightening, a full panic response, doesn't that suggest a kind of failure in individual agency that perhaps even the most profound artistic intent can't fully justify?
I'm not entirely convinced that the intensity of the reactions inherently implies a failure of consent or some manipulative design. I think rather the immersive nature of the experience was explicitly part of its transformative power. The attendees themselves stated, "You didn't watch it, you survived it." Now that speaks to an active, immersive engagement that goes way beyond passive viewing, right? It forces a confrontation with internal realities. This isn't just passive consumption, it's active engagement with a challenging artistic piece. And look at the post-screening environment, described as a recovery circle, a lounge literally built to hold whatever energy came out of that screening room. That allowed for shared processing, for integration, much like you'd have a post-performance discussion in, say, immersive theater.
The unreleased song Lullaby played specifically for that select group, his circle, provided an emotional release, a sense of visibility. For individuals like Minx Cow, who reportedly felt pure recognition, feeling the lyrics externalize something deeply internal unheard. Those recounting the experience recognize this whole thing as a confrontation with art, but more with your own inner stuff and the feeling of being intensely seen. And apparently it led to a shift in their own why, moving from just content creation to human processing. This level of impact, even if it's intense, I'd argue is a hallmark of truly profound art. Art that aims not just to tell a story, but to create an experience that resonates on a visceral level, altering perception. Why should art be limited only to comfortable, predictable engagements if its goal is to provoke profound self-reflection, maybe even catharsis?
Okay, I appreciate the argument for transformative impact and artistic catharsis, I really do. But the intense reactions described, people clenching fists, that guest having a full panic response, audience members feeling overwhelmed or simply unprepared, that strongly suggests a breach of psychological boundaries, likely without explicit, fully informed consent. The film, as attendees noted, didn't ask permission. It slipped past whatever walls we had up. And that anonymous blog post saying, "One of us looked like we saw a version of ourselves we weren't ready for," coupled with the security log later documenting post-event psychological dissociation in their body language, these point to potentially negative, involuntary alterations that last. The notion of an interactive trauma imprint isn't just about emotional resonance. It implies a lasting, potentially harmful residue, a deep, often subconscious alteration, changing how someone perceives or processes future experiences. The fact that the experience left audience members feeling altered, rewired, and feeling like they weren't supposed to be there, unprepared, that raises significant questions about the ethical responsibilities of creators designing such profoundly impactful experiences. The lack of agency, that feeling of something happening to us actively, points towards a design that maybe prioritizes the effect over individual autonomy. It could even be viewed as a form of imprint mapping, a term, again, from the screenplay itself, referring to manipulating neural pathways to alter memories or personality. This isn't just art creating an emotional reaction. It seems closer to art attempting to rewrite an internal state.
So, what safeguards are in place or should be in place when an artistic experience delves so deeply into the psychological wiring of its audience, potentially without their full, explicit awareness of the potential for such fundamental alteration?
Well, ultimately, what we've discussed today reveals, I think, that this was an incredibly potent, unfiltered artistic experience. It was a curated passage, as I said, into self-confrontation that provided a profound, if intense, opportunity for understanding and connection. Daniel L. Bates and Sophia Luna, it seems, created an environment where art could truly choose its audience and deliver both damage and healing on a deeply human level, even shifting the very why of engagement for those who experienced it. That shared undoing they mentioned, it feels like a testament to its transformative power, leaving a significant reflective echo long after the screening. This whole experience really makes us confront the evolving boundaries of art itself, doesn't it? What truly constitutes art in an age where experiences can be so precisely engineered for such profound personal impact?
But regardless of the artistic intent, the evidence, as I see it, still points to an experience designed to intentionally bypass psychological defenses, resulting in documented effects like atypical behavioral dissociation and mood flattening. The ethical implications of creating something like an interactive trauma imprint that doesn't explicitly ask permission for such a deep internal impact, they remain significant. The line between profound art and psychological manipulation is undeniably thin, and this event certainly challenges our understanding of audience agency in these immersive experiences, particularly when the impact is so profound and, it seems, largely involuntary. It really leaves me thinking about how we, as an audience, negotiate that fine line between allowing ourselves to be moved by art and feeling fundamentally moved without our explicit invitation or perhaps a full understanding of the scope of that transformation.
This experience, certainly as described by those who recounted it, is clearly multifaceted. It left an imprint that, as they noted, maybe needs to stay unresolved.
Yeah, as they suggested, maybe some transitions are just meant to echo, more than be explained.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate. We leave you to consider, what does it mean when art sees you before you see it?
What happens when you walk into a curated space that's actually designed to expose something raw within you?
And, well, how do you carry that weight when the lights come up, but the echo doesn't fade? We appreciate your engagement with these complex perspectives.